Hi everyone, Nick here. Welcome back. The United States budget and rapidly growing national debt is getting a lot of attention lately. Joe Biden recently released a proposal to drastically increase various taxes. This is controversial. I'm going to try to provide impartial data so you can come to your own opinions and conclusions about this proposal. I'm going to break this down into 6 parts. First, current taxation, spending, and debt levels. Second, who is paying the taxes and how are they being spent? Third, what is the purpose of taxes and what is fair? 4, an overview of Biden's tax proposal and their projected impact on the economy. 5 is government waste, and 6 are different factors I think we should consider. Afterwards, I will share my opinion. Let's get started. First, current taxation, spending, and debt levels. I want to ask you a quick question. Out of the entire U.S. economy, what percentage do you think the government currently taxes and spends? So out of every dollar of the U.S. economy, how much of it reflects government taxes and spending? Think about it for a second. Include federal government, state government, and local governments. Luckily, we have this data. I'm going to use usgovernmentrevenue.com, and they have good data for this. You can break it down and include federal, state, and local numbers. So we'll start with revenue or taxation. This is a graph of government revenue as a percentage of GDP. GDP is the gross domestic product, which reflects the value of all goods and services produced in the country. As of 2024, 37% of the United States' economic output is taken through taxes. Federal government is 18%, state is 12.7%, and local government is 6.5%. So more than 1 out of every $3 of economic output goes right to taxes. This is a record high in the history of the United States. Now spending. This is government spending as a percentage of GDP. 42% of economic output is government spending, and projections are forecasting it growing to approximately 50% by 2030. The government would be half of the economy, 50%, 1 out of every $2. Of the current 42%, 25% is federal, 8% is state, and 8.5% is local. This is roughly a record high in the history of the United States, with brief spending above these levels for World War II, the Great Financial Crisis, and the pandemic. That brings us to debt. This is debt to GDP, also at record highs of approximately 137%. To recap, the United States is setting records in all of these areas, the highest level of government taxation, spending, and debt. This is not a great trend. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor. Hello, I'm Nick, and I am the sponsor of this video. If you get value from this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to support free financial education. Now, where does all this money go and who is paying for it? For this, we'll just focus on the U.S. government budget for 2023. This is an infographic I found on Wikipedia. We can see that spending was $6.1 trillion, almost a quarter of GDP. The vast majority going to Social Security, $1.3 trillion, Medicare, $840 billion, Medicaid, $616 billion, Income Security, $450 billion, Other, $500 billion, Non-Defense, discretionary spending of $917 billion, Defense of $805 billion, and interest payment of $660 billion. Now, as revenues, most of it came from individual income taxes, $2.2 trillion, then payroll taxes, which help fund Social Security and Medicare, $1.6 trillion, corporate income taxes, $420 billion, and other revenue of $229 billion. Now, interest is actually projected to reach $1.6 trillion by the end of this year, which would make it the largest government expense, more than Social Security. Payroll taxes for Social Security are far closer to a flat tax system where you're theoretically contributing for your future benefits. For decades, the government was bringing in more payroll taxes than they spent. Unfortunately, instead of investing it, they spent a lot of it with the rest of the budget, various wars, and other expenses. Now we are actually running a deficit for those programs. It's theoretical, everyone is paying commensurately into the Social Security and Medicare programs for which they will receive later. Now I want to drill into who pays for the U.S. income taxes. I recently saw this article in the Wall Street Journal titled, "The U.S. Already Soaks the Rich." They had a good graphic showing a breakdown of income and taxes in the U.S. from 2021. The top 1% earned 26.3% of the country's income and paid 45.8% of the tax. Their average tax rate was 25.9%. The top 10% earned a little over half of the income and paid 75.8% of the tax. Average tax rates for this group ranged from 14.3% for those between the top 10 and 5% and 18.9% for those between the top 5 and 1%. Now the bottom 50% earned 10.4% of the income and paid 2.3% of the tax with an average tax rate of 3.4%. Now just below the headline of this article, it does note that the richest 1% paid 45.8% of income taxes, which is up from 33.2% in 2001. The data outlined in this article shows the top 10% are already paying over 75% of federal income tax. The bottom 50% pay 2.8%. Now, all these people are paying an endless array of other taxes, payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, which is 7.65%. Your employer pays another 7.65%. Various state and local taxes, like state income tax, sales tax, property tax, gas tax, excise taxes when you buy or sell a home, or other things, driver's registration fees, various taxes or fees on everything from cell phone bills to plane tickets. And those making over $250,000 pay net investment income tax of 3.8%, and on and on. Remember, 37 cents of every dollar of economic activity goes to taxes. It's difficult to say total tax levels for the different income distributions, but I think the bottom 50% are probably paying around 15% of their income in taxes, whereas the top 10% are probably paying between 35 to 50% or even more of their income to various taxes depending on where they live. Now, what is the purpose of the taxes and what is fair? Taxes are ideally each individual's contribution to society, which the government uses to provide services to those individuals. Taxes are also used as a way for the government to promote or penalize different behavior, like tax incentives to promote electric vehicles or taxes on cigarettes to discourage their use. As for what is fair, that is a very difficult question to answer. Some people argue for a flat tax, that everyone should contribute equally since they use the government services. Others argue for taxes to increase based on the amount of money you're making, a progressive system like the United States income tax now. As we noted before, we actually have a mix of both. The payroll taxes are more like a flat tax, directly tied to benefits you should receive in the future from Social Security and Medicare. While the income taxes are far more progressive, with the top 10% paying over 75% of the income taxes, the bottom 50% paying 2.3%. That means out of every 100 people, 10 of those people are paying 32 times more than 50 of the people combined, and 3.3 times more than the remaining 40 combined. What do you think is fair? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Now we get to Biden's tax proposal. Biden says the wealthy and corporations aren't paying their fair share. He defines wealthy as a single earner earning more than $400,000 or a couple earning more than $450,000. This seems roughly aligned with the top 2% of income earners, who are already paying approximately 55% of the federal income tax. They're also likely paying the most for state and local taxes too. Biden's tax proposal is to significantly increase taxes on corporations and high-income earners. He is proposing over $4 trillion in new taxes over the next 10 years, roughly $450 billion per year, which is roughly 2% of GDP. There are too many proposals to go through one by one, but I want to highlight some of the largest. The first is a 33% increase in the corporate income tax from 21 to 28%. Next is a 100% increase in the GILTI tax, the global intangible low taxed income, from 10.5 to 21%. It's basically taxes multinational corporations in the US pay on assets they hold around the world. Then you have $650 billion in expanded net investment income tax, up to 5% from 3.8% for those with income over $400,000. And for $40 billion for 25% unrealized capital gains tax on high net worth individuals, $238 billion for a 300% increase in the stock buyback tax, $235 billion to raise the top tax rate to 39.6%, and then $214 billion to tax capital gains at ordinary income, which is a 100% increase for taxpayers with an income over $1 million. In total, most of these taxes would be for corporations and a fair amount on wealthy individuals. This would put the US at the second highest corporate tax rate in OECD countries, significantly above the average. On other factors, from top combined marginal tax rate on individual income, it would also put it above the OECD average. Top combined marginal tax rate on corporate income, up above the OECD average. Top combined capital gains be, I think, probably one of the highest in the world, more than double the OECD average. And combined integrated rate on corporate income, one of the highest levels in the world, well above the OECD average. This would make the United States have some of the highest taxes in the world for corporations and higher net worth individuals. Maybe a couple of these revisions could be reasonable, but overall I think these taxes would make the United States much less competitive and disincentivize investing, entrepreneurship, and so on. So what is the effect of all of these taxes? This article is from taxfoundation.org. When they estimate that the proposal would increase revenue over 11 years by $2.2 trillion. Now, this proposal will not reduce our debt, it will just result in less increase of our debt. It is estimated that it will reduce long-run GDP by 2.2%, reduce the capital stock by 3.8%, reduce long-run wages by 1.6%, and eliminate around 788,000 full-time jobs. Now, Table 3 shows extra spending that is proposed in this budget. For the tax credits, the White House claims that it will provide about $800 per year in health insurance premium support to low-income families, $2,600 per year tax break for 39 million families for the child tax credit, and about $800 per year of a tax cut for about 19 million individuals or couples. While the claim is that there will be no new taxes on people making under $400,000 per year, these projections forecast lower after-tax income in 2025 for the top 40% of earners. The long-term projections have lower after-tax income for the top 80% of earners. It certainly seems that heavily taxing business, entrepreneurs, and productivity would result in fewer jobs, lower economic growth, and lower wage growth. Now, trying to help lower-income Americans is a good goal, but is this tax proposal the best way to do it? With projections of lower economic growth, lower after-tax income rates, lower GDP, lower capital stock, and fewer jobs? It's a good question. Now we get to government waste. How much of the spending would be wasted or is currently wasted? It is a bit difficult to find the precise data on government waste. Now here are some data points I was able to find. The GAO, or Government Accountability Office, performs a yearly study of improper payments. This includes overpayments for programs like paying deceased people or those no longer eligible for programs, erroneous payments, and so on. Here is a chart showing the yearly improper payments. Last year, it is at $236 billion. We can see this has been trending up for the past 20 years. The GAO's 2024 annual report outlines hundreds of recommendations to improve the efficiency of the government. The good news is many of the past recommendations were already addressed or in process of being addressed, saving hundreds of billions of dollars. However, there is still a lot of work to do. This shows the open duplication and cost savings recommendations from the GAO. The light blue are ones that are open and not addressed, and the dark blue are open and partially addressed, with the circle containing the total number of recommendations. So we can see that there are hundreds of open, unaddressed recommendations for improving the efficiency of government spending. Nearly 100 at the Department of Defense, over 50 at Health and Human Services, 44 at the IRS, and on down the list. Next, we can look at page 7, which shows some of the top examples of areas with potential financial benefits. So these are areas in which some of the spending could be made. For instance, Medicare payments by place of service could save over $14 billion per year. And there are many other examples listed on this. And they say that their 2011 to 2024 annual reports included over 140 matters directed to Congress to address fragmentation, overlap, duplication, and achieve financial benefits. Of these 140 matters, 76 remained open as of March 2024, over 50%. Now, legislation was introduced in the last couple sessions to address only 31 of them, or about 41% of the open matters. But as of 2024, legislation had not been enacted, and those matters remained open. So Congress is currently possibly proposing increasing taxes while taking no action on addressing these government inefficiencies in the past decade. And some of them seem pretty trivial to implement and address. Next, I want to briefly talk about war spending. Since 2001, Brown University estimates that post 9/11 war spending has totaled $8 trillion. What if we had instead spent this money on investing and growing our economy, increasing the productivity of our citizens, so on? What is the opportunity cost of spending all of this money on war? Next, there are a couple interesting things I wanted to point out in Rand Paul's yearly report on government waste. A couple of them are the U.S. spending $100 million to promote Egyptian tourism. That's quite interesting. Why are we spending money to promote foreign governments' tourism? I'm not sure. Another one is USDA's Cutting Edge Research, which is a study that walked Labradors of 2 different colors and measured their rectal temperatures to see if the fur color affected their body temperature. Another one, in Russia, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, funded a study of walking cats on a treadmill. And then on pages 12 to 14, we can see that the U.S. military and Department of Defense has hundreds of $millions in military equipment they stored improperly against their code, leaving it outside, and much of it went to damage. So you can see millions of dollars worth of transportation equipment, tanks, and other things that were not being properly taken care of and managed. Now, these are just a couple small examples Rand Paul is highlighting, but when you consider that there may be hundreds or even thousands of such examples across the government, this can really add up. That saying, death by 1,000 cuts. Remember, Biden's tax proposal is to increase revenue by about $440 billion. Fixing improper payments alone would bring in more than half of that. It certainly seems possible that a focus on efficiency could free up more revenue than these new taxes without the negative impacts on our economic and wage growth. Now let's finish up with various factors I think we should consider. Number 1, what are we trying to achieve? I think we would all like to see everybody live a higher standard of living with less wealth inequality, more affordable healthcare, education, and so on. The question is, how do we go about doing that? So I just want to use healthcare as an example. Here is the percentage of GDP the US spends on healthcare compared to the rest of the world. We spend about 18% of GDP, nearly 1 out of every $5 of economic activity on healthcare. This is roughly 50 to 100% higher than the rest of the OECD countries spend. It's become unaffordable for many people, so what should we do? Is the answer just to tax businesses and wealthy people more to pay for the higher healthcare costs that are 50 to 100% higher than the rest of the world? Or should we actually focus on making healthcare more affordable? Similar for wealth inequality, should we focus on why it is that the top 1% earn 25% of the income, or top 10% earn 50% of the income, and figure out how to enable the rest of the people to be more productive? Or should we just ignore that and take more of the top earners' productivity and redistribute it? It's easy to see a problem and suggest we add a new tax to try to fix it. But is that best for society in the long term? Will more taxes actually fix the problem? Or is it more like a Band-Aid? With taxation already accounting for 37% of economic activity and government spending 42%, projections to go to 55 or 50% by 2030, how sustainable is this? Next, what should be the role of government? At one end of the spectrum, we could have government control 100% of economic output. History has shown this is worse for the people, but we are currently around 40% now and trending towards 50% in the next 10 years. Is that the correct direction to head? What would be an appropriate amount of government control over the economy? The next consideration, who is more effective and efficient at solving problems, government or entrepreneurs? This may not be a binary answer. Government has produced some inventions like the internet, but then their proposal to roll it out and better connect rural communities exceeds the total cost to deploy SpaceX's Starlink and provide internet everywhere in the world. This is a balance to strike, but I do tend to think that entrepreneurs in competition yield better results and have better incentives than the government. The fourth factor, the total wealth of billionaires in the United States is $5.5 trillion. Even if we decided to take 100% of billionaires' wealth, our government spends over $6.5 trillion per year. It wouldn't even fund the government for 1 year. The fifth factor, is this just a form of class warfare? The rhetoric from the White House is largely around trying to rile people up against the evil, wealthy people, blaming our problems on them and them not paying their fair share, and that the redistribution will go a long ways towards fixing it. Well, the rhetoric from the other side, the Republicans, is often the opposite, to rile people up against the lazy poor and largely ignore or blame them for the many poorly functioning aspects of society. Is this all really just a form of class warfare and distraction? The next factor to consider, interest on our national debt is projected to reach $1.6 trillion by the end of the year, which would make it the single largest federal government expense. Current tax and budget proposals certainly do not meaningfully address this elephant in the room. Those are the factors I think you should consider when you're forming your own opinion. Now, here are my thoughts. I would certainly like to see us make progress on problems like income inequality, making it so that everyone can afford good healthcare, education, and a better standard of living, and so on. I am willing to contribute to that. I am not convinced that the best way to achieve this is to continue to raise taxes and have the government control more and more of the economy. I think having some of the highest corporate tax rates in the OECD will disincentivize business and entrepreneurs and make our country less competitive. Estimates suggest it would hurt our economic productivity, result in lower long-term after-tax wages for 80% of the people, fewer jobs, and more. Making capital gains taxes the highest in the world isn't going to lead to more investment in leadership and innovation. I think we should promote business, investment, and entrepreneurship and make our country more competitive, not less. I don't think the class conflict promoted by both political parties is productive. This focus on class conflict, raising taxes, and so on, is missing the root causes of these problems. We do not spend 2 times more on healthcare than other countries because we don't tax enough. The top 10% don't earn half of the income because we don't tax enough. Maybe wealth redistribution could paper over these problems in the short term, but there are deeper problems to solve. I think we need to focus on those deeper problems. I want to make it very clear that I am not opposed to trying to provide assistance to people who need it. The government already taxes and controls approximately 40% of economic activity. In my opinion, that is enough. I think it should be more than sufficient to provide services to the country and a safety net. I do not think we should continue to trend towards 50% or higher of economic output being controlled by the government. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit to better spend the 40% of economic activity the government already controls. We should demand our government effectively use the vast resources it already controls and solve the real problems. I think this is where we should be focused to benefit everyone in society long term. Unfortunately, solving these problems involves much more work than simply raising taxing and spending. And unfortunately, I don't think either political party has been doing this or will do it until we demand it of them. Thanks for watching, everyone. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I usually don't make content like this, so also let me know if you would like to see more content like this in the future. If you got value, remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Later.